Hey guys, and welcome to my upcoming characters pre-release analysis. In this video, we will be taking a look at the kits for Anne Miracle Fairy and Winter Shopper Rupee. As a disclaimer, these are still subject to change, especially the different damage values. So for the sake of this video, we will be focusing more on the functionality to see what they will provide for the team and much less on the damage numbers. Because if you didn't know, the previous character Laplace actually got a ridiculous amount of changes and she even got changed the day before her release. But just like Laplace, I don't expect any of these characters to be drastically different on the way they function, even with the changes on their skill values. As always, if you find this video useful and you enjoy my content, don't forget to leave a like, comment, subscribe, and let's jump right in. First up, we have Anne Miracle Fairy. She is an SSR support unit, a rocket launcher user, and has the wind element. If the charge attack bug for rocket launcher users is still not fixed in the next update, she will obviously benefit from that. She is also classified as a burst type 2 character, and she has a 60-second cooldown on her burst. But before everyone starts panicking, we will go over her skills to see if that 60-second cooldown on a burst type 2 is justified. So for her first skill, called Fairy Dance, activates after 3 normal attacks. Recovers X% of damage as HP over 5 seconds. This only affects supporter allies. This is basically a worse version of Rapunzel's skill 1 because the healing is limited to support units. Compared to Rapunzel's healing, which targets 3 of your characters to have the lowest HP, it is worse just because of the fact that Miracle Fairy's healing is limited to the character class. And realistically, it is very rare to find a team that has more than 2 supports, so more often than not, you will only be healing 2 characters at most using this skill. Her skill 2, Fairy's Jest, affects all allies. Activates when above 90% HP, increases HP potency, which basically means it increases HP recovery or healing, and the second half of this skill reads, activates when the last bullet hits the target, while having over 90% HP. This affects all enemies, decreasing the HP potency by X% for 10 seconds. Some sources say that the increased healing from this skill is around 20% and the decreased healing for the enemies is around 80%. But as I said in the beginning of this video, those numbers will most likely be changed, but if the final values are somewhat close to 20% and 80% respectively, I can see this being a really good skill, not just in general, but more specifically for those stages with the annoying healers. Although, the one thing that you have to worry about is the 90% HP requirement. This is a very similar problem to what Milk has, where if you drop below the certain HP requirement to activate your buffs, it is very hard to go back up to that required HP, even with the built-in healing from their kit. That is if you don't have any other healers. This buff can easily go away if you are in stages where the enemies have a lot of AoE attacks like the Interception S. In the regular stages on the other hand, it will be relatively easy to keep Miracle Fairy above 90% HP as long as you have proper shielders or characters that will taunt the enemies away from her. And finally, her burst skill, called Blue Butterfly Slumber. Affects one random fallen attacker unit, resurrect with X% of HP, activates once per battle. It also restores HP equal to X% of character's max HP for all attacker allies and increases attack by X% for 10 seconds. And again, Miracle Fairy's kit is very similar to Rapunzel's kit, except Miracle Fairy is more like a very picky version of Rapunzel. Comparing this to Rapunzel's burst skill, Rapunzel can revive any of your allies regardless of their class, i.e. attacker, defender, or support. And she also heals everyone in your party, not just attackers. Although, Rapunzel has no attack buff like Miracle Fairy, but that's still something I'm willing to trade out for having a unit that has more versatility and less restrictions. As a burst type 2 support, Miracle Fairy will be competing with 2 other characters, namely Dala and Admi. Dala and Admi are both on the more offensive side of things compared to Miracle Fairy, who does have an attack buff but focuses more on survivability. Dala gives an attack buff, crit rate, and crit damage to her team while increasing the remaining cooldown on the burst skills for everyone. And Admi increases reload speed, charge damage, and crit damage to her team while providing a bit of survivability with her skill 2. You also have to compare Miracle Fairy with Rapunzel. Rapunzel has the upper hand between the two, and I can see why that's the case. Rapunzel is more like the premium healer because she is a pilgrim unit, and Miracle Fairy is sort of like an open alternative with some caveats attached to it. If you ask me, I doubt that Miracle Fairy will be a better option over Dala in most cases. And if you already have Rapunzel, Miracle Fairy is an easy skip because Rapunzel is looking to be the better option. And you would rather slot in a character like Dala in your Rapunzel team so you can reduce their burst skill cooldown, but you can also use Volume plus Miracle Fairy if you want to do sort of like the same thing with Dala and Rapunzel. With all that said, Miracle Fairy is not a completely bad option if you ever decide to pull for her. She provides almost the same utility as Rapunzel, And if that's something that you think you specifically need in your team and you really like her character, then by all means, go for it. I will be taking a deeper look at her potential uses and team comps before her release. So with that said, let's move on to Winter Shopper Rupee. Winter Shopper Rupee will be an SSR character, Burst Type 1 Assault Rifle user, and she will be classified as a defender. It will be interesting to see what she has to offer since we only have 3 Burst Type 1 defenders if you include Idol Flower. For skill 1, Winter Premium, activates when the last bullet hits the target. Affects all allies, increases defense by X% for 5 seconds at level 10. I think this skill is alright compared to the other buffs that the other Burst Type 1 characters have, but maybe I'm just undervaluing the defense stat because I'd much rather have attack or other damage amplifying buffs over this. But it's not completely terrible if the defense increase value happens to be somewhat high. Then I can see this being useful in some scenarios. Moving on, we have her skill 2, VIP Gift. Affects all allies, activated when any ally unit uses their burst skill. Shopping passive, increases defense by X%, stacks up to 4 times, and lasts for 20 seconds. The next part of this skill reads, affects all allies. Activates when the caster reaches maximum stacks of shopping at the end of full burst. Burst gauge reload speed increases by 7.9% for 5 seconds. From my first impressions, I think this skill is okay. The only thing I'm not a big fan of is that you have to cycle through your burst meter 4 times before you can get the maximum effect of this skill. And also keep in mind that as of now, the shopping buff has a 20-second timer. So you need to be able to use your burst 3 within the set time frame, or else you would lose the stacks and not get the second effect from this skill. This somewhat limits your team compositions if you want to use the full potential of Winter Shopper Rupee, since it will most likely not be optimal to use Winter Shopper Rupee with other Burst Type 1 or 2 characters that have longer cooldowns. Moving on, we have her Burst skill, Shopaholic Date. This has a 20-second cooldown and has an electric damage type. This taunts all enemies for 5 seconds, recovers X% of attack damage as HP over 10 seconds. So basically lifesteal just for Winter Rupee herself. And this also increases reload speed for 10 seconds, which applies to all your allies. This is your standard tank burst that comes with a taunt, but it also gives lifesteal to Winter Shopper Rupee, which makes a lot of sense because she will be taking a lot of damage during her burst. Ultimately, she will only be competing with Ludmilla if you're looking for a Burst Type 1 defender. And even then, I really think Ludmilla will be better if her taunt eventually gets fixed. They both have different weapon types, so that's something else to consider. Ludmilla is an SMG user, which is generally better at close range, and Winter Rupee uses an assault rifle, which is more versatile, but slightly drops down on damage when close range. Overall, Winter Shopper Rupee is an okay character, but looking at her kit right now, it's kind of hard to recommend using her over the other defender characters like Senti and Polly, so if you already have those characters, Winter Shopper Rupee will most likely be a skip. And usually, in 1-1-3 teams, the Burst Type 1 slot is already reserved for the uncontested Burst Type 1 characters like Litter, Noise, N102, and Rapunzel. So if you also have those aforementioned characters, then you're probably set on your Burst Type 1 slot and you don't necessarily have to pull for Winter Shopper Rupee. But hey, I know most of you will not be pulling for her because of meta purposes, so it's all good. That's about everything we know about Anne Miracle Fairy and Winter Shopper Rupee. I will be doing my pre-release analysis for Neve tomorrow, so definitely stay tuned for that. As always, if you found this video useful, don't forget to leave a like, comment, subscribe. Thank you so much for watching and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.